about the son of the soil who has done so much, for culture in Dominica and throughout the Caribbean as well. And while he is battling a health challenge, Dr. Alwin Bully continues to play his parts in this cultural landscape, in the creative arts, in so much. So to put Dr. Bully in the Dominican, maybe the wider Caribbean and the creative sector context is to really give a chronological overview of the works of this famous playwright, short story writer, and so much more. Costume designer as well from Dominica. But that order in which his contributions occurred from first to last will really be done by historian and archaeologist Dr. Lennox Honeychurch. So Dr. Honeychurch will present a birthday tribute to Dr. Alwin Bully. And let me just look at the program. It is entitled The Sternest Passion, Alwin Bully and the Caribbean Cultural Renaissance. As I said, Dr. Bully is celebrating his birthday today, and this occasion is indeed a wonderful and fitting way to celebrate that man who is most known for designing the national flag of Dominica. It was in the year 1978. So really, DBS Radio is pleased to partner with the UE and the Alias Facers in this venture. Quite a few people are already seated. Just a few hitches earlier on that caused a late start, sort of. But very soon we will start. In fact, the head of the UE Open Campus, Dominica, Dr. Kimon Joseph, is at the podium. So let us join Dr. Kimon Joseph.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. And welcome to our presentation for this evening. My name is Dr. Kimon Joseph. I am head of UWI Open Campus in Dominica. And our presentation tonight is a birthday tribute to Dr. Alwin Bully. And the lecture for tonight will be presented by Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, and it's entitled The Sternest Passion, Alwin Bully and the Caribbean Cultural Renaissance. To start us off this evening, I'd like to call Monsignor William John Lewis, who will do the national anthem for us, followed by the invocation. Monsignor.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Please join me in singing the first verse of our national anthem. I love beauty, I love splendor, I'll to all so sweet and fair. All must surely gaze in wonder at thy gifts so rich and rare. Rivers, valleys, hills, and mountains, all these gifts we do extol. Healthy land so like all fountains, giving cheer that warms the soul. Please be seated. My invocation will take the form of a scripture passage, then a short prayer, a reflection and prayer, and then I'll ask you to join me in singing the Lord's Prayer at the end. So prepare your hearts to sing with me. And the reading that I've chosen is from the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, or the Apocalypse. And I'm reading from chapter 15, verses 1 to 4. What I, John, saw in heaven was a great and wonderful sign. 7 angels were bringing the 7 plagues that are the last of all, because they exhaust the anger of God. I seemed to see a glass of lake suffused with fire, and standing by the lake of glass, those who had fought against the beast and won, and against his statue and the number which is his name. They all had harps from God, and they were singing the hymn of Moses, the servant of God, and of the Lamb. How great and wonderful are all your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are all your ways, King of the nations. Who would not revere and praise your name, O Lord? You alone are holy, and all the pagans will come and adore you for the many acts of justice you have sown. The word of the Lord. It's the last part that I like, when they're singing the song, and I'm saying, when I get there, I want to be with them singing that same song. How great and wonderful are all your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are all your ways, King of the nations. Who would dare refuse you honor or praise your name, O Lord? That, my dear friends, for me is the song that I want to sing. Not when that time comes, but I want to start singing that now. And I want to invite you to sing that song with me as well, to praise and thank God for all that he has done for us. And today especially, to praise and thank God for our brother Alwin, for all that he has meant for us and all that he means for us today. And today we join him in saying thank you to God for 74 years. 74. The word of God says 70 is the sum of our years and 80 for those who are strong. We're going to pray that he will be strong and even stronger than 80. But more than that, dear friends, we thank God for ourselves. We thank God for having the opportunity to come here tonight, to stand together, to speak with each other, to delight in meeting each other once again. And even that is the song that we sing, the song of life, the song of thank you, God, for all that you have done for me. And thank you especially for this moment. So, Lord, we thank you. And we ask you to bless us. Bless in particular our brother Alwin and, of course, his wife Anita and their children. Bless us who have come to celebrate with him. Bless the work we do. May what we do here tonight redound to your glory and honor and truly be a blessing for us and for all those we know. And Father, we ask this in the name of Jesus, who is Lord forever and ever. Amen. And so I ask you now then, please to join me in singing the Lord's Prayer, the prayer that Jesus himself taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
Amen. I know sometimes we're not quite sure what we should do after something like that, but I think we can clap. Praise God. I think so, yes. Thank you very much, Monsignor John Lewis, for leading the invocation for us. Now we have some tributes from people who have been touched by Alwin. I know that everybody in the room has been touched by Alwin, of course, and you are his special friends and family members who have been invited to be part of this event this evening. And those who are joining us via DBS and Kyrie FM are also privileged to really participate in this event this evening. So we have some tributes. We have his daughter, Sade Bully, his son, Brent Bully, and also Mr. Dion Henderson from the Alliance Française, Mr. Cecil Joseph from the Dominica Broadcasting Station, as well as, well, I will present on behalf of the University of the West Indies as well. The event this evening is being done through the patronage of UWI Open Campus, to the Alliance Française as well, and also DBS. So we will begin with the tributes from the children, from Sade and Brent.
Happy birthday, Dad. We love you. We miss you. We love you. And we continue to be inspired by the work that you have done and the man that you are. Thank you for being the best father. Thank you for being the best father a family could ask for. And thank you for being a great papi to River and Zen. We love you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Love you.
Can I say happy birthday, Baba? Happy birthday.
Thanks.
So we have the other video, Dean. They're telling me 1 minute. Or maybe it's 1 second, I'm not sure. But since dead air is not allowed on radio, I'll keep talking until he gives me the cue. Yes? So this evening is all about Alwin, and we're very delighted to be able to share in this moment with him on his 74th birthday. So Alwin, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. Are we ready? Yes, they are ready with that one.
Hello everyone, I'm Brent Bully, and I want to wish my father, Mr. Alwin Bully, happy 74th birthday. Dad, I'm so proud of you. It's been nothing but a blessing to see all the achievements you've accomplished over the years. You've been a mentor to so many people and have done so much for the culture. Not a lot of people can say this about their father, but you are my hero, and I just feel so blessed to have you in my life. And I want to wish you nothing but happiness in years to come. And happy birthday, Dad. I love you.
Thank you very much to the two Bully children for their tributes to their father. I now invite Mr. Dion Henderson, who is the director of Alliance Française, to give the tribute on behalf of the Alliance Française de la Dominique. Dion?
Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. Okay. I'll say something about me personally first, and then it'll be short, of course. I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Bully when I returned to Dominica in 2013, late 2013, someone who had written a book and had the intentions of adapting it to a movie told me, we have to go see Mr. Bully, because Mr. and Mrs. Bully, because they're the ones that have the experience and they have to be part of the project and everything. And I was supposed to take care of the music on that project. So I was excited then, because I've always heard of Dr. Bully, but I never met him. I was out of state and stuff like that. But I knew he was the one who actually drew the flag, the national flag. And I was like, wow, that was it. That was, for me, one of the most important people culturally I would have met. And that was it. From that, Mr. and Mrs. Bully, I'll just say close friends, very good, very close friends. Okay. Continuing on that, Dr. Bully has been a member or part of the Alliance Française board since 2011, I guess, so a little over 10 years. And he also served in the capacity of vice president for quite a few of those years. He was very instrumental in assisting in the theater group La Cour des Arts, which was formed here in Alliance, but that was actually done before being on as a member of the board. He has, of course, assisted and helped in many cultural activities at the Alliance over the years, and has been present to advise us as a board member, to give his input, and in almost any way possible. You know, I could call him and ask him, you know, any little thing, you know, when I have a crazy idea on doing a cultural event, you know, he would give me his input. And so, on behalf of the Alliance Française de la Dominique, we would like to really express our sincere thanks to all what you have done for us and with us. So thank you very much. And how would you say that? Rendez-vous l'année prochaine, next year. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dion. I now invite Mr. Cecil Joseph, who is the General Manager of DBS Radio, to give a tribute on behalf of DBS. Cecil?
Good evening to everyone present, those listening via DBS Radio and those viewing via DBS Facebook page. What can I say as manager of DBS Radio about Mr. Bully? First, I want to say that as a boy growing up, I was very, very, very troublesome. And I remembered Mr. Bully residing on King George, the V Street, or the 5th Street. And in those days growing up, you would hear people classify, people like myself, young boys, classify these people as the bourgeois of Roseau. And so we felt it was important as the little boys in Roseau to pass by Mr. Bully's father's or parents' home every night around this time to ring the bell and run away. So Mr. Bully, I'm now telling you, when you're hearing that your parents would go down the stairs, just know I was part of that group. But as life goes on, at that time doing that, I did not know that Mr. Bully was the nephew of my neighbor, Mr. John Bully, who had a mango tree just on the window of my mom's bedroom. And it was a Julie mango tree. I'm sure that you all can remember that mango tree. And Mr. Bully used to have 2 short dogs, a parrot and a pond in the middle of the yard, and a lot of vegetation. Again, with my wicked mind, we would do a way to get onto the mango tree, and we would hear the parrot telling John Bully that there are some young boys climbing his mango tree, and John Bully would come out or would get out of his house with a rifle. But that did not get us scared. But we knew the love that Mr. John Bully himself had for us as boys. And eventually, in growing up, he decided that he wanted us to be part and parcel of our growing up. And so, growing up to be a bigger man, getting to know about Mr. Bully, very active in my community, Roseau, found out that at that time, fortunately for me, I lived on 39 Fields Lane, Ted Daly lived on 41 Fields Lane, and Dennis Joseph lived on 32 Fields Lane. So the whole business of radio became an attractive thing to me. And at that time, my parents would not allow you to listen to nothing else but DBS radio. And then, hearing one day that Mr. Bully, well, I should say that some situation happened in Dominica in the 70s, and Mr. Bully was then the chairman, memory serves me right, in 1979 to 1980 of the DBS board. And people like Gordon Henderson, I think at the time, was manager. And I want to say to you, Mr. Bully, that it has to be because of your inspiration for the culture. While many of us can relate to Mr. E.O. Leblanc, but we'll also remember that you too played a part in culture. And so you were able to take that culture that you had in you into DBS radio to the present day. At that time, DBS would have been only 8 years old. And you were able to take DBS and allow it to be freer as a broadcasting institution for the Dominican public. And then you became general manager in 1982 to 83. Again, transforming the landscape of broadcasting in Dominica through your vibrancy. And so, on behalf of the staff, board of directors, staff, and management of DBS Radio, I want to thank you very much as you celebrate 74 years of your existence on this earth. I'm sure that you may not hear, and none of us will be able to hear when we're in this cool place of ours to get to the next zone in life. But I can guarantee you, sir, that what you have done for your beautiful country, Dominica, and more so, the national flag of Dominica, we are proud of you at DBS Radio. We are happy that you were associated with DBS Radio at once upon a time. We are happy that you were able to contribute to Dominica's development in broadcasting. And so, as you celebrate 74 years, I wish you many more years on this earth. And that as you continue living, that you'll be a great model for us in this beautiful country, Dominica. Thank you, and may God continue to bless you as you live through your life.
Thank you very much, Cecil. I will give the tribute on behalf of UWI. I met Alwin Bully late. It was only about 14 years ago, actually, and that is only a drop in time compared to a lot of you in the room that you've known him for. Back then, in 2008, I was head of English at Convent High School, and I invited him to read out loud to one of my classes for Literacy Week. I was amazed that he, a living legend, had even taken my call in the first place, far less to show up to reading day, and he had such a wonderful time with my students. When I came to work at UWI, Alwin was one of the first friends of UWI that I met. I represented the Open Campus on the Nature Island Literary Festival Planning Committee. Alwin was the chair of the committee, and I served with him along with others like his wife Anita, Gregory Rabes, Shyla Esprit, Delroy Williams, Celia Sorrendo, Darren Grell, Gemma Lawrence, Shauna Johnson, and a few other people. I learned most of my events management skills from Alwin's example. What I admired most about him was his strength and his spirit. He's a hard worker, and I have learned that once Alwin sets his mind on something, he has set his mind on that something and he's going to make it happen. For example, as part of the literary festival one year, we were to host an acting company who performed Hamlet. There were so many logistics to work out, so much work and so little hands to do them. I was beginning to feel overwhelmed. In one of our meetings, I threw my hands up in exasperation. I said, it can't be done. It just can't be done. Always the calm one, Alwin leaned over to me. He placed his hand over mine and he said very quietly, it can be done and it will be done. And my friends, what do you know? It was done. And the event was a tremendous success. After Hurricane Maria, the huge tree between UWI and Alliance Française toppled. Alwin came to see me and to take a look at the damage that had been done to the site and to the grounds. I will never forget what he said to me. With a solemn face, he said, "Come on, it's a shame about that tree, a real shame. But you know what? I always thought that this section of the grounds would be a perfect place to build a creative arts center. Maybe now that the tree is down, we can think about that." Of course, Alwin's relationship with UWI started long before that. He received his Bachelor of Arts in English and French from UWI-Kville in 1971. He was the president of the Guild of Undergraduate Students at Kville in 1970. In 2011, he was awarded the Honorary Doctor of Letters by UWI. In 2012, he presented the inaugural E.O. Leblanc Memorial Lecture entitled The Gilded Mango, Culture, Livelihoods, and Development in Dominica, 1950 to 2012. In 2014, he received the UWI Alumni Award for Arts and Culture from the UWI Open Campus Dominica. Last month, UWI Kville's Faculty of Culture, Creative and Performing Arts and the Earl Warner Trust awarded Alwin the Earl Warner Trust 2022 Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition for his outstanding achievements in performing arts and ongoing advocacy for Caribbean cultural expressions. It was during that event that Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, another living legend, originally presented the lecture that we will hear this evening. For all his accomplishments, I think what makes Alwin Bully most special is that he's a genuinely good person. He cares about other people. And in all that he has done, it is this human connection that draws people to him. Alwin has been a real friend to UWI and a real friend to me. I have trusted his advice and I have felt supported by his warm presence. On behalf of the staff of UWI Open Campus, I congratulate Alwin on his latest accomplishments granted by the Earl Warner Trust. I also thank you, Alwin, for your friendship all these years, and I wish you a very happy birthday. Thank you. All right, so it's time for us to get into the lecture now. And so, to present our speaker, Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, I will call the president of the Open Campus Guild of Students Dominica chapter, Ms. Tiffany Johnson. Tiffany?
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Lennox E. Honeychurch was educated at the Lord's School in Barbados and the St. Mary's Academy in Dominica. He gained his master's and doctorate degrees in anthropology at the University of Oxford, with dissertations focusing on the period of contact and cultural exchange between the indigenous Kalinago people and European and African arrivals in the Eastern Caribbean. He is a UWI Honorary Research Fellow. Dr. Honeychurch was awarded an honorary doctorate by UWI in 2012 and is a former member of the Campus Council of the UWI Open Campus. In 2013 and 2018, He presented the annual UE Open Campus and Cultural Division E.O. Leblanc Memorial Lecture. In 2014, the UE Open Campus Dominica site presented Dr. Honeychurch with the UE Lifetime Achievement Award. He is the director of the Island Heritage Initiatives, a consultancy and contracting company for restoration projects of heritage sites that has been responsible for the restoration of Fort Shirley at the Cupboards National Park. He has advised on restoration proposals for Fort Frederick, Grenada, Fort Charlotte, St. Vincent, and Betty's Hope Plantation, Antigua. He is the chair of the Portsmouth Citizens Planning Committee that has compiled and published a study for future physical development of Dominica's second town and its environs. He has also served as a member of the National Reparations Committee. He has published numerous books and academic papers on archaeology and the history of Dominica and the Caribbean. He has served as a member of the Dominica House of Assembly from 1975 to 1979. He is a recipient of the Golden Drum Award for his contribution to the preservation of Dominica's cultural heritage, as well as the Dominica Cicero Medal of Honor for his contribution to historical and archaeological research. Last, he's a laureate of the Anthony N. Sackber Caribbean Awards for Excellence 2011. Dr. Lennox Honeychurch.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be here this evening, particularly for my good friend Alwin Bully, who, like everybody else who would speak here and who would want to speak about Alwin's contribution, the contribution that he has made to our own lives. It is thanks to Alwin, in fact, that most of my participation in theater, in performance, in carnival costume building and all of that. It was Alwin that drew me out, like he drew so many others out, to accomplish these things and to contribute and to participate in the life of Dominica during the period that he was active and prior to going to Jamaica, as we shall see, and serve on a broader scale for UNESCO. I need to describe and give a background to the title of the talk, The Sternest Passion. And I take this from the first line of Phyllis Shandolfri's iconic poem, Love for an Island. I'll just read the first couple verses here so that you get the context. Love for an Island by Phyllis Shandolfri. Love for an island is the sternest passion. Pulsing beyond the blood through roots and loam, it overflows the boundary of bedrooms and courses past the fragile walls of home. Those nourished on the sap and milk of beauty, born in its land site, tremble like a tree at the first footfall of the dread usurper, a carpet-bagging mediocrity. And mediocrity was something that Alwin could not tolerate. And it colored, in fact, all his contributions. There had to be a standard. Theirs is no mild attachment, but rapacious, craving for possession, rude and whole. Lovers of islands drive their stake, prospecting to run the flag of ego up the pole. Their passions drive them to perpetuation. They dig, they plant, they build, and they aspire to the eternal landmark. And when they die, the forest covers up their set desire. It goes on, but I felt that just for this evening, to get the spirit of what I see as what urged Alwin on, and many of us too, in all that we do, whether it is in business, whether it is in the arts, this desire to achieve for the sake of the island, to do something for Dominica. And Phyllis Allfrey encapsulated it very well in this poem. The second half Alwin Bully and the Caribbean Cultural Renaissance, really focuses on that period in the 1970s when Alwin had returned from the University of the West Indies, as Kimon explained, in the early 70s, 71, where he had already been very active in what one could call the early days of regional activism, as he was active there in Barbados with a whole group of regional participants. And so when he came to Dominica, it was the beginning of that period of change. And throughout the 1970s, he, in the way that he loved best, whether it was the performing arts or carnival or the writing of plays that he called Calypso Theatre, and the gathering around him of young people who were keen and active and wanted to participate in what I mentioned earlier and rounded up within that poem. There was this amazing group that he was able to piece together. And that cultural renaissance really was in a way the piecing together, as Derek Walcott said in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, of piecing together the broken shards of the Caribbean experience. Just a little quote from Walcott in his acceptance address. He likened the process to that of a shattered vase that was being reassembled. He says, "This gathering of the broken pieces is the pain and care of the Antilles. And if the pieces are disparate, ill-fitting, they contain more pain than the original sculpture. Those icons and sacred vessels taken for granted in their ancestral places. This restoration of our shattered histories, our shards of vocabulary, our archipelago becoming a synonym for places broken off from their original continent." So that period of the 70s, when great change was happening within the Caribbean, the move, for instance, to self-government and the searching for new cultural patterns and programs, all of this is embodied in what Walcott was talking about. But also, it was a period of a kind of reinvention of history. So, to quote Marxist historian Hobsbawm, he talks about this pulling from the past to recreate the present. Quote, "We should expect it to occur more frequently when a rapid transformation of society weakens or destroys the social patterns for which the old traditions had been designed." So those old traditions that those of us who are in close to Alwin's age, I am going to be 70 next month. so those of us who were there at the time, we know what we're talking about with those old traditions. For had been designed for another time, producing new ones to which they were not applicable, or when such old traditions and their institutional carriers and promulgators no longer proved sufficiently adaptable and flexible or are otherwise eliminated. So that was really what was going on in the 70s when Alwin was active. Somebody else adds to this board and says that it may be true that these symbols are distorted, exaggerated, sometimes invented. But even in this latter case, some such inventions do not fall from the sky. They originate in the history or culture of a given group of people and are only accepted when they do not deviate too far from existing and cultural perceptions and social memories. These memories are not necessarily true themselves, but they are social facts at the moment of their general acceptance. So when you take the history of Dominica and you go back to the 1970s and people are beginning to discover the whole story of the Maroons linkage with the landscape, of the Kalinago dynamism in making sure that we were the last island in the Caribbean to be colonized officially. All of these things were coming to the fore in the 1970s and floating into the 80s, but particularly during that decade of the 1970s. So when we take all these things together, this is where Alwin Bully comes in as a major participant in the Caribbean cultural renaissance and rebuilding. The rest is going to be relatively informal. Most of the people here will know something of Alwin's background and his family and his contribution. And so, using these slides as notes to do this presentation, we'll move into the early influences of Alwin's life that then catapulted him into what he was going to contribute. And one of the most important things for Alwin, and indeed, as we shall see, for Colin and Barbara, was where they lived. And it has already been mentioned that he was right there in the middle of King George V Street. And the wonderful thing about Carnival and Streets in Roseau is it is like a theater. You have this route going around the center of the city, and the verandas provide the sitting places for the spectators, and so do the sidewalks. And then this spectacle passes on. And so from his childhood, Alwin was aware of this great burst of cultural activity that was going on right outside his home. And the picture that we see here is taken from the veranda of their house, of the Bully's house, now called Kaz Bully. And it is from there that you had that almost call and response of people going through the streets, the bands, the costumes, the songs, the whole creativity that was being absorbed by Alwin as a little boy. In some of the older photographs, black and white photographs that we can collect dating from the beginning, very beginning of the 20th century, when carnivals started out in the Newtown Savannah, before there was even a Botanic Gardens. This is all part of that cycle, and that was happening and building up and doing this very creative display. And music as well. So Alwin had all of this right outside his home, and it was not just carnival time, it was the drama of life in Dominica. Whether it was the women going down the street selling balaufwe, calling all their calls of the different types of things that they were selling, all of that was part of the theater and the performance that was going on and influencing his life. And his parents and also had this very strong influence on him. And I would also add in this all his two siblings, because his mother was an extremely talented person in her own right. She had been highly influenced by music, and her sister, seen here as the maid of honor at their wedding, was an extremely creative and talented pianist and composer even of songs. And also, before the days of recorded music, people like Rosemary Coulson-Lartigue acted as the conveyors, the bank of knowledge, the bank of musical knowledge. And I remember talking to her about those early days when she was in the Newborn Babies Jazz Band, but even more interesting, when she was the pianist for the silent movies. I mean, you know, how many people in this day and age talked to and knew someone who had to sit in front of the screen and play the dramatic music as the image of the film went on? The music matched the drama. And she said to me once that one of the reasons that her eyes gave her problems particularly one eye, was because she had to look at the musical score and at the same time match it to the action that was going on the screen. So that takes a great deal of talent. This is also part of the background that would have influenced Alwin. And then his father's sort of stern, if I remember correctly, stern but kind guidance, a sense of order, of discipline, of not going too overboard, and taking into consideration alternate points of view. So all of this was also part of his influence. Then we have his uncle, John Bully, who was an extremely talented artist. But of course, in our small island situation, you'd never be able, particularly back in the 1930s and 40s, to earn any sort of living through your art. But John was really extremely talented. And back in 1990, I came across a huge box of lawyers' papers because he began his career as a lawyer's clerk, and he would have to sit in the court and listen to these cases on behalf of his lawyer, who was Mr. Randall Lockhart. And he would sketch the people around him. He would sketch the judges, he would sketch the market women who were coming in to give evidence, and the policemen and the colonial officials. And these folded pieces of legal paper are covered in these amazing drawings. And the house was being not demolished, but it was being basically dumped. And I seized these cardboard boxes, and I've been able to share them with Alwin. So we have the talent of John Bully, who really had to then earn a living as he did as an excellent accountant and treasurer for both the government of Dominica and regionally in the Federation of the West Indies. So when you think of that background and what Alwin had, and Barbara and Colin had around them, you can understand that there were elements of discipline and creativity and enjoyment that was linked. And then, besides the question of being in the middle of Roseau, in that center of activity, that center of theater, they also had a country residence up in Girardel. So you got the village life, you got the nature, you got all these influences as well as purely the activity within the capital. I hope this works. It's properly broken now. Just flick the next one for me. Yes. And so this background also went further back because the traditions of Dominica, they were very much aware of. I mentioned his mother through his mother, but his father's sister, Nurse Bully, well known by those of a certain age group, she also, had all of these stories from the past. And when I showed her this picture, she identified the middle woman sitting as one of the Bully ancestors from in St. Joseph. And so here we have this link with the past as well. And even in Alwin's own life, from a child going on, there was this thoughtfulness, this thinking, this imagination taking place. If you could just go back, because I also wanted to mention, I don't want to forget the brother and sisterhood that he had around him, which was so very important. Because we have Colin, and like his uncle, he had to, get a civil service job and work in agriculture and get a degree and all that kind of stuff. And yet, his talent for organizing things like carnival and carnival bands and helping Alwin with the whole business of costumes and costume building, that was a very great contribution. And then Barbara had her own talents, particularly in singing and drama, performing on stage, and the songs that we still enjoy today, particularly at Christmas time when she composes these Creole songs. So let us not forget that on either side of him, he had this very vibrant influence of his brother and sister. And the thinker, it's interesting to see the body position many years apart. Anita actually was the one that thought that up and said, look, you know, this picture is a moment in his life when he is always thinking, imagining, dreaming, and dreams then became reality. Yeah. And the first area of theater, of course, the convent prep and the convent school with the nuns that they had in those days were always, particularly annually, putting on shows. And there was this singing, the choirs, and all of these things which also contributed to that background. But more important was the little theater group. It was the precursor of the People's Action Theater. And the little theater group, we were talking now about the late 1960s, mid to late 1960s, and Alma Harris was the key proponent and leader in this. But we must remember that in the 1960s there was still this traditionalism, powerful and strong and useful as it needed to be. And so the focus was mainly on Shakespeare plays. So here they are in one of the plays, Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. Alwin is there, Anita is there, which also lends itself to the long-standing relationship and link that Alwin and Anita had. Essentially, I'll say it quite honestly here, a childhood sweetheart which has stood firm and held him up right through to today. And then in 1964 was the big Shakespeare anniversary around the world. And Dominica put on the play The Merchant of Venice, in which Alwin played Antonio. And there were a number of people who are either passed on, but who are significant players today, not necessarily in drama, but in public life, who were in that play that was directed by Geoff Robinson, a former permanent secretary and educator. And so that Shakespeare period sort of provided the base for what was to come. So Alwin there performing in Shakespeare plays, giving a good foundation to what was to come in the future. And another influence, very strong indeed, was the famous folklorist Mabel Sissy Corderon, who happened to be a cousin. And so her group that she set up was very influential to them as well, because they became performers and active within the group under the guidance of Sissy Corderon, who was such an amazing character and really a trailblazer, because she got into trouble. There are records, if one looks up a book by H.L. Christian, Gate Crashing into the Unknown, he writes about the experience that he had of Sissy Corderon being berated by people of her class for going and doing these things and encouraging bel air and singing patois songs and things like that. Even an English woman who was the wife of one of the headmasters of the Dominica Grammar School was defending Sissy Corderon. But it was that dynamism and also what she was producing that influenced these children and brought them into teens. In the 1960s, there were several areas of opportunities for performance, mainly going abroad for the Commonwealth Arts Festival in 1965. And then, of course, the royal visits gave an opportunity for performing for people from the outside world, basically. Say what you want about the royalty, but it gave you a chance to perform and display in front of the media, international media, etc., and be recorded. There is a wonderful Pathé film, a documentary film about the Queen and Prince Philip's 1966 visit to the Caribbean. And Alwin and his cousin Claudette feature in this film. You can look it up on YouTube and you'll find it there. Alwin dancing a sweeping ballet opposite his cousin Claudette. And here they are in Britain in the Commonwealth Arts Festival in 1965. They had to go to England by boat in those days, but they were all together and they performed in various cities around the United Kingdom. And we see faces such as the late Parry Bellotte and Claudette Coulson-Lartigue, Alwin, and Tony Astaphan, right here, and others. Photograph taken in England for a magazine during that time. So that was a great period as well to get exposure overseas. Alwin also, of course, besides performing, had the skill of art. And from very early on, we're talking about 1967 when Dominica got associated statehood, Alwin was involved in helping to design the stamps that came out, these 4 stamps. And in fact, the one down at the bottom with the ballet dancing was Alwin's main contribution to the stamp design. And you can see there, what's taking root is this praise, this focusing on the traditional culture and building it up. As I mentioned in the earlier quotes from various people talking about the reinvention of tradition and Walcott's piecing back the shattered pieces of the vase, all of this is part of it. You're taking what was considered to be a lowly folk thing and bringing it up into the fore as a representation of your nation, your island, etc. He was highly influenced by Phyllis Shand Alfrey. One of the things with Mrs. Alfrey was, I'll just give a very brief background. Born in Dominica, went first to the United States and then in England. She wrote the famous book which stunned a lot of people, and that's a whole lecture in itself, called The Orchid House, and published a lot of poems and short stories in magazines in Britain. When she came back out to run politics, by 1962 she had been kicked out of the Dominica Labour Party and she had to find a living. She had been a minister in the federal government. She was elected in 1958 along with Mr. Edward Oliver LeBlanc, and they both served in the parliament in Trinidad. Mrs. Alfrey was the Minister of Labor and Social Services. When she came back in 1962, she began, that's all she could find, was to edit the Herald newspaper, and then there was trouble in the Herald. Mr. Scobie came to take it over, and she then started her own newspaper called The Star. And it was a small newspaper run off on a Roneo machine, but it produced the first opportunities for many young Dominica writers to publish their short stories, even if short stories were about 4 quarter pages or more, and poems, etc. and such. And Alwin's work appeared in the Dominica Star at that time. I, as well, put in number of short stories were there. There was quite a gang of us that would bring our short stories to Mrs. Alfrey, and she'd give us $2 for it. That's about as much as she could afford. It's like at Christmas, she used to make cakes for the newsboys that would go and sell the papers. But this was part of how we first got our footing in having our work published. And then by the late 60s, Alwin was off to the University of the West Indies. So he left this little sheltered Dominica experience, albeit with the experiences of going to England and also participating here in a number of various activities, national activities, etc. Because we must remember by 1965, Edward LeBlanc had declared that the 3rd of November would be our national day. And then by 67, we got associated statehood self-government, and that is when National Day then really took on its important form. All of this was happening in the 60s at that time. And then Alwin went to UE, Cave Hill, Barbados, and really then he was able to spread his wings. He was so popular, he became the head of the the University Guild. And whenever they had trouble, for instance, there was disputes over certain lecturers, and they very active in student demands and student activities. He brought carnival and queen shows to the university. Remember, this was stolid, serious, stern Barbados, and these small islanders were coming up with all this vibrancy and color and music, and Alwin was a leader among them to establish all of these that were going on. While he was involved in the theater and in the events of Cave Hill, he was also exploring participating in theater groups in Barbados. And one of the leading, long-standing theater groups was the Green Room Theater. And he was able to participate with some of the leading performers in Barbados. There's Alfred Pragnell, who is a sort of doyen of performing arts in Barbados at that time, and also exploring avant-garde European plays, like in this case, Fantastics. But at the same time, he was also involving himself in the birth and the development of Barbadian theater. And one of his main mentors was Daphne Joseph Hackett, who went on to form a theater group. She has passed away, but she is well remembered and respected for her contribution to local Barbadian theater, the writing of plays, and also an award, theater award, and a theater at Queen's Park in the center of Bridgetown has been named after her. But Alwin participated very closely with her in this new movement that was taking place in Barbados. Once he came back to Dominica, then all this richness and wealth and experience that he had experienced in Barbados and at UE, with the confluence, remember it was in Barbados, but you had all these people from around the Eastern Caribbean and even as far as Jamaica. So all of that was happening there. And when he returned to Dominica to teach at the Dominica Grammar School, here he raised the Grammar School Club, Drama Club. You will see that they're all boys, as they were in those days, but they put together some very interesting plays and performances, and drew in, for the first time, a new generation, a new group of people who would be interested in theater and the performing arts. And nice to see that we have here in our audience tonight the guy with the little afro right at the very end and his broken arm. It's LeBlanc right here tonight. And there are many others who either moved on or went into theater later on. And Alwin then moved on from the school drama group to taking the little theater of Amma Harris. She had emigrated to Canada, taking that little theater and turning it into the People's Action Theater. You can see the label, the name, changing as we're getting into the 70s. This is the People's Action, you know, and this is Calypso Theater. And we're going to write plays and perform plays that touch the people themselves. And so here we have one of the plays that he wrote, very popular, Nightbox. the Night Box, but there was also plays like Streak and Speak Brothers Speak, and all of these plays that were touching on social turbulence and events that were going on in Dominica itself. One of the most catching performances, plays that he wrote, and music, and Einstein Leblanc, I think, was also involved in composing. They'd sit down, and Einstein, in those days, you played guitar and all, right. And then Alwin would have the words and piece the things together. And this one was Folk Nativity. Well, this one really kind of shook Dominica. The Folk Nativity, the music, the performances were bright. It told a Christmas story from a Caribbean point of view. And without naming names, I make reference to, there were two ladies lived down in King George V Street, very active at Carnival, very amusing and lively. They were old school, but they got a little wild from time to time. And I'm going down King George V Street, the rehearsals are going on, people are hearing that this show is going to be coming on, and it's Folk Nativity, and it's about the birth of Christ. And one of these ladies, I don't want to name, but those of you all who are of that age group will know, stopped me and said, "My dear Lennox, I hear that Alwin is telling the Christmas story with calypso and wind-up, and Lennox, Black Angels, my dear. You ever hear the like?" That's the 70s for you. Black Angels, my dear. You ever hear the like? So all of this was coming from her. And then she had an amusing, a year or two later, Alwin and Anita were getting married. But they decided they weren't going to get married in a big cathedral wedding. And a relative of theirs, Miss Garrard, had this lovely back garden behind her house on King George V Street. And so they decided to have their wedding there. And of course, it was all in those days, shirt jack and, you know, cool outfits, not a gilet or a suit in sight, and a wedding cake and all that. And the dear lady who I mentioned earlier with the Black Angels, she came to me and said, "Bon Dieu, Lennox, I hear Alwin and Anita are going to get married outside the church in a garden. I hope ants don't fall on them from that tree. I hope ants don't fall on them from that tree Miss Garrard has in the middle of her garden." But it was a memorable wedding because all the young groups, the people who were key in People's Action Theatre and so were at that wedding as well. So we can see the vibrancy and stuff going on. And then besides writing plays, what the People's Action Theatre were doing under Alwin was bringing in West Indian, Caribbean plays. So here we have Tija and his brothers, Derek Walcott's famous play, and this was performed actually, if I recall, at the Old Mill. That is another story, another contribution of Alwin's, which we shall be dealing with. But he was very creative in not limiting himself to the proscenium arch, of trying to develop a theater that was more open and accessible. And so they moved on, and the big hit of later 70s was Jesus Christ Superstar. And I think we have another member of the audience kneeling at the back over here. We recognize her. And Alwin, I was in that, I was Herod. And you had Levi Loeblack playing Judas. Raymond, there you are. You were Pilate, right? Yes, yes, yes. And we had Peter Giraud, and there was quite a group. And the design, because Alwin was, of course, into theater design as well. So the design of that open stage, taking the back, not the stage in front, but the back of St. Gerard's Hall, with all these different levels, and engaging with carpenters to fit this scenery together, and the dynamism of what was internationally a leading musical, but then adapting the musical to the Caribbean thing. And that's an example where Alwin brings me in. I was Herod singing to Jesus, "Prove to me that you're divine, turn my water into wine, King of the Jews." Monsignor, you were there as well. Monsignor John Lewis, he was performing in there as well, and a number of one or two other faces that I see here. So all of that, you see, drawing people in, giving them this wonderful experience which they would not have had otherwise. And then he moved in, always trying on a new experiment. So he decided to turn Jesus Christ Superstar into film. And of course, he chose places all over Dominica for various scenes. My swimming pool and singing and Herod was on a wreck off Rockaway down by Canefield, and these tankers were passing by, so it made it look as if, of course, I was wealthy, man. I was one of these oil magnates, and all these girls were dancing on the level of this wreck. It was great. And here we have the scene where Judas hangs himself, and the other characters, the scribes and the Pharisees and the others, surround him. This was filmed at the Old Mill, before the Old Mill actually became the formal center for the cultural division. But unfortunately, this film was all put together, and I think maybe it had one showing, and then it was wrecked by Hurricane David, and film already, destroyed, and so this wonderful film, apart from once, never saw the light of day again. That was Jesus Christ Superstar in film. But as we shall see, Alwin wanted to branch out into film work, and he did so. The other play that really made headlines was The Ruler in Haruna. He took the book by G.C.H. Thomas, which actually, G.C.H. Thomas had been a permanent secretary both in Grenada and was of Vincentian. So he linked the political 1950s story of politics in those two islands and, the Lesser Antilles, the Eastern Caribbean generally, and he wrote this really devastating book about politics at the time. And Alwin took the book and turned it into this play. He had steel band, he had union members. I mean, the costumes were divine. Anita played. We remember this is before Hurricane David, and people still had all their wonderful hats. People like Mrs. Fidel, she had the most amazing outfits, to go to Government House, and hats. They were being picked up all over the place. And so the costumes for that particular show were great. And there was a steel band that Alwin trained, and you had people, musicians, also leading musicians contributing to this, because Alwin had this capacity to draw this talent towards it. And so The Ruler was a great hit here. We went all over the island playing it. That's another feature of People's Action Theatre, of going out to the countryside and performing. But even so, within the region, and when we went and performed Ruler in St. Vincent, there was a couple nights we had to do it twice, because the crowds outside were so huge, because we were telling their story. It was all about Joshua and his wife Ivy, and all the political goings on, and everybody wanted to see it. So that was a great hit. We did it in Barbados and St. Vincent and so. The Ruler in Haruna. He called it just Ruler. Yeah? And there were a number of leading, Noreen Joseph, Gary Didier, and many others in it. Unfortunately, I always got typecast. I was either the priest, the planter, or the governor. Or should I put it in another way? I was either the priest, the governor, or the wicked planter. So, unfortunately, I couldn't. I did help with scenery and other stuff like that, but I was stuck in those roles. Yeah. And here we have some adventures, because sometimes, when you have a large group of people and you have props, and you have scenery. Getting all those people into a little Liat plane and flying up the islands was really a challenge. And so Alwin bravely take these people's children and put them on these rusty steel-hulled vessels and sail them off to Martinique or in Carifesta down to Barbados and whatever. But you see, this was the camaraderie, the experience, the joining together that we will never ever forget. And all thanks to Alwin. And now, so we had these adventures, and then he moved into directing film himself. One of the major films he did was this one, and you know what happened to me today? I had everything written and down on the slide, and Anita sat next to me for half of today. And when we got to the end, it all disappeared. The computer, something went wrong with the computer, and all the names of the films and the plays. But this one was actually a company out of Los Angeles, USA, that got Alwin to put together this for family planning. It was a 30-minute film. And here are people like Ken Robinson and others. Now, this is the great thing again. Alwin would call on people who had skills that were not necessarily related to performing. But, you know, he knew they had the skills of recording, filming, whatever. They had a little old camera, movie camera, and he would call them in and put the whole thing together. And they were honored and excited to be involved. He himself took a major role in this film, A Handful of Dirt, a film of Russell Watson, which was filmed mainly in Barbados. A very dramatic film about a family and inheritance and land and stuff like that. So he starred in that film. He was the leading sort of patriarch in this film. And his friendship with, when he went to Jamaica, and we'll talk about that in a moment, his friendship with Jamaican artists and actors when he was making films of his own. For instance, we have this film based in the traditional band Mauvais in the village of Collyho, and it had a bit part with the Jamaican actress Leonie Forbes, who died weeks ago in October last month. And the film itself was Osei and the Masqueraders. So you had the band Mauvais of Collyho, and you had the film set was that beautiful village of Collyho with all of its lovely tikai houses and the streets and the main square. It was a perfect place for filming, and he drew in a number of people from the village, particularly the Masqueraders. And that was one of the last films, actually, that he directed. And Leonie Forbes, leading Jamaican actress, was a great, great friend of his. And she, even in her latter years, she said, Alwin, whenever you make a film, I will be there. And she came to take this bit part in Collyho for this film here, but she had also acted in the Orchid House, the film that was made by British television based on Phyllis Allfrey's book. So she had a part in that as well. She passed away, I think, in October, and the Prime Minister, the Governor General, you know, commented on her life and her work and her contribution to Jamaica. Dance was also a very important part of Alwin's life. We saw in the earlier stages with the Kyrie artistic group of Mabel Sissy Coderon, that early dance, but then he encouraged many other groups that rose up in the 70s, Rose Kings, dancers, they had all sorts of names, and he would be encouraging them with their dance and choreography. So that's another component of his contribution to Caribbean and Dominica art. What was also happening in the 1970s is the Kalinago territory and the leaders of the Kalinago people like Irvin Ogist and others, were really developing a new concept where the Kalinago people had been ostracized and considered to be not important and have peculiar ways in contrast to other Dominicans. All of these things, made them almost victims of the rest of Dominican society. But with all that was going on in the Caribbean in the 70s, all the music of Bob Marley, get up for your rights, and all of this, was influencing the Kalinago as well. And so from the 70s, they really were getting more dynamic and heavily involved in what was going on in the rest of Dominica and in the region, because they were being influenced by the Native American movement and indigenous groups in Central America and North America, Canada as well. So Alwin contributed a great deal to them, assisting without pushing himself in front, giving guidance, and also mainly in 1981, because they'd already been performing for things like National Day and so. But in 1981, he composed an entire drama piecing together all the elements of Dominican dance and theater forms to take to Carifesta, 1981 in Barbados. And so the story of the Kalinagos also became part of that. So his contribution to the Kalinago advancement and what's going on today and the self-determination, all of that originated a lot with Alwin's work with them back in the late 1970s, 79, 80. And his love for Carnival and his love for the traditional costumes of Carnival. You know, it was very difficult for people like him, Colin, Athy Marte, and all the rest, when in 1963 you had this terrible and tragic fire where a number of leading young men in the society lost their lives strapped into the sensei costumes, and a number of other people being injured. It really shook Dominican society, and for 30 years the sensei was banned. In 1993, Alwin, Dermot Southwell, others who were involved in Carnival, persuaded the government to, the time has passed, let's try again, because this is such an iconic costume of Dominica. And so in 1993, with a new stipulation that you must have an ID on your costume to identify who you are, made it to the streets again. And now it is an accepted form. But people like Alwin, having lost their good friends and in many cases family, it was a brave thing to attempt to start this all over again. And here, Alwin's art came to the fore, because remember, while all of this was going on, all the theater and the drama that I talked about, Alwin was quietly maintaining his skill in the arts, in actual painting. And here, these are wonderful paintings of the sensei that he did. And he worked both in pastel and acrylic and watercolor. Another thing that he did was to take the illustrations by the Italian artist who lived in Dominica and painted in Dominica, Agostino Brunias, and encourage people to use the patterns of dress in the 18th century for carnival bands, for groups that were performing for National Day in all the competitions, the ballet, the quadrille mainly, and the other folk dances. And so we had the inspiration of those Agostino Brunias costumes, Alwin saying, look, we could use these. They're part of Dominica's heritage, and we can use them today as well. Beautiful, and they have appeared from time to time in carnival bands. His carnival story is a lecture in itself. If I went into the costume building, the encouragement he gave to people, young men and women, to work until 4 o'clock in the morning building these costumes, particularly queen costumes. And what we have to do is to get a collection. We can't, they've all been destroyed, but a collection of photographs of all those costumes that Alwin designed and made. And he was always on to a new thing. When people like me were doing a still costume, turn, 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 Alwin was doing a costume that opened up on stage, you know, and burst out with all kind of mechanics. So here again, you know, this exploring of the techniques that were possible. And he was always winning. You know, once you saw an Alwin Bully costume come on stage, you know, that is going to be best costume. You know, it was very obvious. But the encouragement he gave to many of those costume builders who then became prominent in the costume business was remarkable. And art, we're going to touch on this a bit, because he also found difficulty. He was doing all these other things, and then he had to make time for painting and art. Very detailed work, a lot of it touching on revolutionary aspects. This is him as a young artist, some of his very early work. He also painted religious scenes, and this one was for the chapel at the Brothers Chapel at St. Ives at the SMA. A very early religious painting of his, and other, as I said, the medium changed. It could be line drawings and wash, watercolors and oils, always linking and depicting Dominica scenes. Pastel, some beautiful bodies, paintings that still hang in his home, and the fascination with the sensei always featured as well. So here you have that represented in his art. And encouraging young people, just like the costumes, just like the performing arts and everything else. Here we have Arnold Toulon and his brother. There they, and Alwin is sitting down, encouraging them, and Arnold has gone to St. Lucia, where he's considered to be one of the leading painters in St. Lucia. All these art workshops and things that were organized, helping with the artistic group. People like Earl Etienne, the long lamented, sad, late Earl Etienne, who we have lost, getting him, Earl, to go to study art in Jamaica. These are things that these people, whether they are with us or gone, never forgot about Alwin's help, Alwin's contribution to enriching their lives. And the literary festival. I used to say about Alwin, you really think a literary festival is going to last in Dominica? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's not going to last. As long as it is, whether it's 4, 5, 6 years, it will contribute. It will do something. It will provide. I always sometimes used to say, Alwin, you're aiming for the stars, but sometimes you hit the moon. He said, well, the moon is far enough. You know, we may not reach the stars, but at least we got to the moon. And this was the kind of thing where those early days, with the support of all sorts of people, including his family and very good friends, to get this literary festival going. Unfortunately, it isn't what it was, and various other issues such as hurricanes and stuff has intervened, but it was a great effort and a great contribution, and through his network of friends, he was able to bring some of the leading Caribbean authors down, as in the case of his very good friend, Derek Walcott, the Nobel laureate from St. Lucia. Now, the other big, you can say that a lot of these artistic things were ephemeral. They were living in people's memory. But one of the hard and fast, concrete contributions that will stand for Alwin as his major contribution is the Old Mill Cultural Center. There was this ruined building. Government had bought the whole of Canefield for housing, and there was no thought into what could you do with the old building? It sat there. People, a certain individual searching for scrap came and sawed whole sections of it and took it away and sold it for scrap. And in 1976, Alwin said, look, man, this would make a great cultural center, just as he told Kimon about the grounds of the UE Center site. And so in 1976, he got together a whole set of volunteers just to clean the bush. He got prisoners from the prison. He persuaded prisoners to come, and young people to clear the bush and to begin to use it. He said that, look, if we begin to use it, they're not going to take it for anything else. We have to get it so popular that nobody will dare to take it for anything else. And so these shows were put on. I remember there was a sort of amphitheater which used to support big vats of lime juice. And these were created as the seating, and then on the bottom was this big stage. And then eventually, bit by bit, after the establishment of the cultural division, first you had the cultural desk, and Mr. Christian, who was the Minister of Education, worked very closely with Alwin and assisted and pushed. And so from the cultural desk became the cultural division, and Alwin helped with the legislation. It's one, if not the only government department that can manage its own bank account, the National Cultural Council, so that they can raise their own funds and use their own funds for things. This is quite an achievement at the time, and he was able to persuade the powers that be to include that in the legislation. And so it went from strength to strength with money from US aid, from the French, from the British, over the years to build it up to what it is today. And that is Alwin's major contribution in stone and mortar. He also pushed for the Arawak, the Arawak House of Culture. He wasn't getting very far with Miss Charles. Miss Charles, you know, she was a little tight with the money, and she felt, I'm not sure if I want to spend this money. But when she heard that an evangelical church was going to buy the Arawak and turn it into a major kind of evangelical cathedral, she found the money. And she said, okay, design something and let's go ahead with it. And so the Arawak House of Culture came into being. Also, with the assistance of other people, once again the network, Gilda Thibault Nassif had a link with a person who was a woodcarver in Haiti and brought down Mr. Louis Desiré to teach woodwork and art. And Desiré remained here until he passed away. And there's Alwin working with Desiré, and then all the young people that came around and were taught by Desiré, who are now producing tourist craft and other things, you know. So this old mill, you know, is a standing tribute to Alwin as well. And Carifesta, I have mentioned already, the Caribbean Festival of Arts. This was such a key thing in 1981. There had been those before that Alwin had taken groups to. But in 1981, the Carifesta of 1981 was really the big one. It made an amazing impact onto art in Barbados, resolving the Barbadians to set up groups and departments of culture and so. And Alwin was in the forefront of that as well at that time. And then he decided, remember, you can have all this fete and good time and, you know, love of country and scrape together with what little salary you can get, but there comes a time when you have a family to support. So by that time, Alwin had to think of his and his family's future. But beyond that, he was getting restless in this little pond here of Dominica. And so he accepted the position to go and work for UNESCO, for Caribbean culture for the Caribbean region, and he was there for just over 20 years, from 1987 to 2006, and making a major contribution across the region to that work. But also in Jamaica, the great thing was that Alwin was able to have this amazing freedom. He had a following, he had a society that was keen to support theater, and this was just down his street, just in the right alley. And here he is one of his greatest achievements in Grenada. You had this group, the Missionaries of the Poor, and led by Father Holong, and Alwin would put together each year these amazing Bible stories, but with a cast of dozens and dozens, and amazing technical, like one that Anita always mentions is the story of Moses and the opening of the Dead Sea. It just had everybody stunned. But once again, he got people who knew techniques that he could put together and turn his ideas and his dreams into something. And apparently the crowds every night when the Red Sea opened and went through, like Cecil B. DeMille films, the response was amazing. But the main thing was they were raising money for these really desperate hospices for neglected people in the rough outskirts of Kingston and elsewhere in Jamaica. And that's Alwin's major contribution there, but in the arts in general. He rounded up, and just as he had done in Dominica, he attracted some of the leading performers in Jamaica, the leading costume builders and set designers, and put on amazing plays. And so the name of Alwin Bully in Jamaica, rose to the heights. He was identified with the achievements of theater in Jamaica and all of the people that he drew around him. But it also gave him a great personal freedom. That if he had remained in Dominica, there were constraints that he would not have been able to overcome. But in Jamaica, the response, the support, the backup was tremendous, and he was able to achieve these great things. And drawing writers, because there was also the writing apart from the performing, people from around. We had Earl Warner, who the award is named after, the Lifetime Achievement Award, but also the Warner Walcott Theatre at the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill in the Errol Barrow Center for the Creative Imagination. And here's a gathering. You have Omade in the center from Antigua, and Alwin down at the very end, and others, as they say, too numerous to mention. But they were all gathered together, and Alwin was a highlight of this. And then beyond the Caribbean, he was in workshops in the United States. You had the Eugene O'Neill Center for creative people to gather together and share their ideas and experiences. Alwin was very much part of that as well. And Derek Walcott, as I said, was a really good friend, keen supporter. And I was just told a story today where Alwin was rehearsing one of Walcott's major plays, and Walcott flew into Jamaica, and he said, I want to come to a rehearsal. Alwin said, no, you're not coming to any rehearsal. He says, but it's my play. Walcott said, but it's my play. He said, but Alwin said, but I am the director, and I don't want you to see an unfinished performance. When you come on the first night, you will see the full performance. And Walcott, the famous Derek Walcott, Nobel laureate, shook his head. Okay, Alwin, all right. And that would be it. And so Jamaica really gave him a great opportunity to spread his wings. And to draw together, as I've mentioned before, a number of people. There are faces in there that if you were cognizant and a Jamaican here in this audience, you would recognize many of these leading performers, actors, etc., all gathered together. And in a network of writers, also you have Austin Clarke, Robert Lee of St. Lucia, and OECS authors also gathered together. It was part of his job to encourage them, but it was part of his commitment as well to develop this regional network. And awards galore have poured on. In fact, there's a shelf in his home that they're all packed together. It was difficult for me to take pictures of all of them. Many of them were repeated because of the prizes that he was given. You have awards and honors, and of course crowned by the honorary doctorate of the University of the West Indies, and local honors like Cicero Medal, etc., and awards from various theater groups and cultural actors. And Kimon earlier on mentioned a number of these given by the University of the West Indies. This is a gathering of the people who came to his honorary doctorate award, which was for the open campus. It was held in Antigua, and in 2011, the Governor General of Antigua at the time, the late Sir Dwight Venner, that is on our $50 bill, and the Chancellor, Sir George Alwin, and getting the award of the honorary doctorate along with Alwin was Dame Perlette Louisi, the long-standing Governor General of St. Lucia. And interestingly, they should have got it together at the same time, because from UE days, they were very close in performing arts as well. So this was a high point of his career, this honorary doctorate recognized by UE. And this is another honor that has to be given. When I talked about this in Barbados last month, you know, there were people with tears in their eyes because I spoke of Anita's commitment to Alwin's work. It was a team, an amazing team, a team of love. I talked a little bit about childhood sweetheart, but a team of like-minded people committed by love to each other's activities. Times were tough, of course, from time to time, and tragic with the loss of their son Pio. But at least tonight you heard from Sade and Brent and the admiration they have for their father and his work. But certainly that background, that strength that Anita Bully provides to Alwin in the past, and even more touching as of now, is something to be highly respected in the whole story of Alwin Bully and his contributions. And Anita, I really, have to thank you, because I have seen it almost from the beginning. And it's, when you're putting on these shows and stuff, you need somebody to add up the ticket sales. You need somebody to deal with how many chairs are there in the audience. All of these, down-to-earth things. And Anita was there for Alwin in that. So thank you once again, very much indeed, for that contribution, Anita. And the flag. I have left this for last because I think this is one area. I'm beginning to, I may cry. One area that I think Dominicans for generations to come, way, way, way ahead, will always remember the name of Alwin Bully for. Those of us who experienced his performing arts and his contribution, those of us who were involved in the 70s and the 80s, and yes, the memories may pass, but that flag will always be there as an identifying factor of Alwin's contribution to Dominica. And it was so lovely on Flag Day that the school group from down the road, down Federation Drive, I think it was the Christian Union Mission Primary, came up to Alwin's home and wanted to see the man who designed the national flag. And Alwin contributed the design. Apparently, Cabinet at the time played with one or two things. The colors were slightly changed by 1981 as a result of the rules of the International Court of Heraldry, where certain colors cannot lie against certain colors. So when Alwin originally designed the flag, the black was on the outside. And now it has been put in the center with the yellow and the black, yellow, and the white, all in a line with the black in the center. And the dynamic Cicero, this actually causes us to have a more difficult and expensive flag to produce, but it is extremely beautiful because all those little colors of the Cicero then have to be replicated. And if you count them all, there are 8 colors in the flag, when most colors have 2 or 4. But we also, along with Nicaragua, we have the only flag that has purple in it, with our imperial parrot, and purple, of course, is the color of the emperors of Rome, the imperial Amazona Imperialis. And so, with this flag, we will never forget. We will never forget because we will link all those other contributions along the line to Alwin Bully and his contribution to Dominica because of, as Phyllis Alfrey said, that sternest passion. Love for an island is the sternest passion, pulsing beyond the blood through roots and loam. It overflows the boundary of bedrooms and courses past the fragile walls of home. Theirs is no mild attachment, but rapacious, craving for possession, rude and whole. Lovers of islands drive their stake, prospecting to run the flag of ego up the pole, the flag of Dominica. Thank you all very much indeed. And thank you. Great. Thank you all very much. I'm trying to run over my time.
Thank you very much to Dr. Lennox Honeychurch for this wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I'd now like to just open the floor for family members, friends, people who have been influenced by Alwin who want to say a few words. Dean and Robo, do you have a roving mic that I can use? Or? Thank you. Javid, would you be able to assist me with the roving mic? So I will, I'll just stand here and then I'll just recognize a few people. So I see already that Ian would like to say something, as well as Gloria. Gloria, could you come a little bit more forward? All right. And then, so we'll just take a few people who want to speak about Alwin's work and its influence on their lives. Ian?
Okay, good evening, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
Really stirring contribution there by Dr. Honeychurch. But what I'm going to say tonight is not a tribute, really, but it's a precursor to what I want to say tonight. I was privileged to have Mr. Bully as my principal in the 70s for a couple of years in the grammar school. And so much went on. I mean, when we go back to the days that most of us would say that was our best years at school. So many revolutionary things that happened in arts and culture and attitude. I think we broke the most records in that year and everything else. But coming up to that, even as an adult, I remember once I was in Jamaica, I think that was in 1996 at Karimak, and I invited Mr. Bully to come to one of my productions. I was just doing a course there, and I thought I would put out something called A Slice of Me. And Mr. Bully said, yes, he'd come and see it, you know, and he came and he encouraged me so much, and that has been Alwin Bully all through. And basically, you know, my plea tonight is this is a very powerful room. When I look at the people here, it's a very powerful room. A few years ago, I wrote something on Jean Rees when the building where she used to live was obliterated to put some other project, which I don't know, and most Dominicans probably don't even know about it. And it was called A House and a Mango Tree. Some people read it, and they made me say, great article. You know, we as Dominicans, we are very good at clapping and saying great article, but we do nothing about it. Isn't it a shame among us here tonight that nothing, this is one of the 5 icons we could ever talk about in Dominica, anyhow you put it, Alwin Bully has to be there. And none of us have ever supported my call to have to name something after Bully. Alwin Bully, are waiting for him to die. So many people are naming things after people who had hardly done anything much for Dominica, and nothing. This is serious, you know. Nothing is named after Mr. Bully, Dr. Alwin Bully. I am saying tonight, I'm putting out a plea. I'm also going to do my final article. I've written about Mr. Bully. I've called about it. My last book, he was the one who actually did the preface of my book. Such respect I have for this man. And, you know, I'm just seeing that we have a room where we have persons who can advocate. And so I'm pleading tonight that persons come forward as from tonight and ensure the Arak House of Culture, which is now being renovated, that his name is assigned to it. I spoke to 1 or 2 people about the Arak House of Culture. A guy told me, well, what about the Araks were here too? I said, how do you know Mr. Bully is not an Arawak? We don't know that. You know, and the significance that this gentleman has done. The old mill, where is the old mill, which he is involved in actually putting together, Arak House of Culture, something should be named after this gentleman. So I'm just pleading out now. Yes. And I think Mr. Triumph, who is one of the guys I wrote for in my life a couple years ago, had a song about that. And I think I didn't know, but he just told me tonight he's actually going to perform it tonight. I think Anita asked him to perform it, so he's performing tonight. So I really wish from now that people put their money where their mouth is and just stop clapping and just do it. Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I can say quite a lot in terms of my relationship with Alwin. So in terms of the time, I have jotted some notes. Otherwise, we could go on and on. All right. My love for the arts took on a different level when my mother allowed me to attend the very popular shows of plays of the People's Action Theatre in the 70s. Then I joined the PAT in the 80s, and there began my relationship with Dr. Bully as my mentor in the field of drama. Oh, how I love those days. Oh, how I remember those days. It was through that foundation and network that was facilitated by Alwin that I was able to grow in the field of theater arts. And my relationship with Alwin did not break even when he went to Jamaica, because whenever I visited, I would be part of whatever drama function or play or whatever he was doing. I would be there also. And anytime we did any project, I would seek his advice. In fact, just recently in looking at some things, I found a free-page email where he had commented on a project that I had sent to him. He was also the co-writer and director when La Coup des Arts did one of our first movies, It Only Takes One, a play written by me that was adapted to a movie thanks to the HIV unit and Julie Frampton. I continue to work with Alwin in the Caribbean Theatre Network and also with Kaz Bully Productions. My theatre life has been nurtured by Dr. Bully, And it is what it is because of my relationship and the mentoring of Dr. Bully. I'm indeed grateful. So tonight, on behalf of myself and La Coup des Arts, I would like to say, happy birthday, Alwin. Stay strong.
Anyone else? No? Okay.
My name is Guy, and I know Mr. Bully from I was a little boy in Jamaica performing in the Father Holong shows. And I remembered, well, many things. One, I don't know, but Mr. Bully did a show called Jesus 2000 in Jamaica, had people crying. It was about the life of Christ. And talking about changing theater, he like really broke the fourth wall because Jesus actually took the cross through the audience. So people in the audience were crying, and it really changed my life about how art can be. And then once I was injured, and Mr. Bully did some Reiki on my foot. And some people don't know what Reiki is, but why I'm saying this story is because when you're hurt in the arts, you know, most times people outside the arts will say, oh, well, it's time for you to stop, you know. But, you know, having somebody in the arts who could actually give you a technique, give you something to actually make you keep going was really inspiring. And then Sade, his daughter, and I performed together for years in America. So even though I grew up and moved to America, his daughter ended up following me. No. We are so performing arts family that she ended up coming and performing in the same company that I was in. And then during COVID, me and my wife and my family, we moved here. And I just want to say, I can't forget Anita, the other half of the great half. Yes? And they've been so welcoming and kind to us and sharing. And I just want to say congratulations for your contributions to Dominica. It is a real treasure. And it's very important that we have people who are focused on nation building for our society to grow. So thank you, Mr. Bully, and happy birthday. Yes.
Thank you, Guy. Give me courage to speak. Those who don't know me, my name is Sandra. I'm originally from Venezuela, and I love to say I'm Venezuelan by birth and Dominican by love, because I married a Dominican man. So I moved in 2008 from a city of 7 million to an island of 70,000. And in around 2013, I was basically going through a marriage crisis. I was ready to divorce or basically commit suicide. And I don't know why or how I decided to go to Anita and Alwin. And I said, I don't know how you can help me, but you must help me. Because I need to be creative. And somehow we arrived to the conclusion that I will do films that day. That was it. And Alwin says, there is a meeting of the creation of the Audiovisual Association. And I remember Anita say, but that's not gonna last. It didn't last. But she's gonna meet people there. And I met there my cameraman, who I still have a great relationship, Kimani, and also Colton, who I have a great relationship. I have made 2 movies with them, 2 short movies. And I'm so, so grateful for Alwin just believing. Like, I remember I came to help with the customs and and there was this lady who was like, the captain of the part of the custom I was doing, and something happened, I don't know what, and she stopped being, she just left, basically. And he said, you are gonna direct part. And I was like, what? You can do it. You can do it. So, I just said, things that make you believe in yourself, and you just go ahead and do it. That's it. You have no option but doing it. And I'm so grateful to both of you, Anita and Alwin, for your contribution to, the culture and my life in the culture here. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you who spoke about your experiences with Alwin Bully. I will now invite Ms. Nadia Rivera, who is the president of UWI Alumni Association Dominica chapter, and Dr. Barry Casimir, who is the program officer of UWI Open Campus in Dominica, who will be presenting to Alwin the Earl Warner Trust 2022 Lifetime Achievement Award to Alwin and Anita. That award, Dr. Bully brought the award down with him after he had presented this lecture that he did this evening. What did I just say? Dr. Lennox Honeychurch brought down with him after he had done the lecture in Barbados, The Sternest Passion. So I invite Ms. Rivera and Dr. Casimir to come up and take the very beautiful and delicate award. And I invite Anita to accompany Alwin to receive the award on behalf of the University of the West Indies. Thank you so much to Ms. Rivera and to Dr. Casimir for presenting the award. I now call on Mrs. Anita Bully, who's the one who put this whole thing together with me. Thank you so much for that. To give the vote of thanks on behalf of the family and the team who worked on this evening's event. Anita?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Why did I touch that? Okay, that's better. Tonight was a special night, and I thank everybody for it. First, I hope I don't forget anybody, Special thanks to, of course, Lennox for his wonderful presentation, which was a real tribute to Alwin. These presentations are so important. They are important documentations of Dominica's history, and without them, we are losing a major part of the history of Dominica. Thank you, Lennox. To the UE Open Campus, and especially Dr. Kimon Joseph, for insisting that we do this. To Brittany, for the poster and the program, and the rest of the staff at UE for all their support in making this event happen. Alliance Française, thank you for the venue. We were looking at the UE conference, it's auditorium to do this. And of course, we would not be as comfortable because the chairs are really student chairs, and it was just a little too close. And we're still a little nervous about COVID, although we are without masks and moving around and having a good time. But we just felt here would be just better. And I want to thank Mr. Piper for allowing or encouraging the shift of what he had planned for here to UE so that we could have here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Piper. Of course, Alias, thank you for the venue. And this can be such a beautiful venue. And more beautiful when you have a person like Mrs. Jennifer Fadell, who adds her special touch to make this venue so warm and beautiful. Thank you, Jennifer. I can't tell you thank you enough. And the thing with Jennifer, she's leaving the island tomorrow, I think it is, and she just did this for Alwin. So it's a big thank you, Jennifer. And I want to thank Lester for helping get some stuff to here and assisting with whatever he could. To Monsignor John Lewis, Father John Lewis, as we used to say. There he is, okay, for stepping in when Tasha P. was supposed to do the national anthem. And of course, she's not well and couldn't, well, she has a problem, a bad problem. So she couldn't do it. Of course, I knew I could call on him last minute to do it. And his powerful rendition of the national anthem was really wonderful, especially that, and especially the invocation. Thank you so much. Special thanks to Mr. Dennis Joseph and Ivona John Baptist and DBS for covering the event and making it available to the rest of Dominica and especially the region. So many people wanted to come and you can't put them into the space because we have so little theater space big enough to hold people. So thank you for making the show available to them and to making it available to our friends in the region and especially in Jamaica. The amount of WhatsApps that been going out. Okay, I had to turn off my phone completely to get it done. And I want to say a special thank you to Archipelago Trading and Fresh Markets for the wines that you're going to have. And to Jessica Burns for doing some cheese platters for us so we could have a little snack along with it. And did I forget anybody? And you, the audience, for coming and making this so memorable. Okay, and I know everybody right away said, I'm coming, I'm coming. And then there was one stage where people said, can I bring so-and-so and can I bring so-and-so? And I'm seeing the numbers climbing. And we still have UE to put them in, you know. So it was such a relief to get here so that we could have everybody here. Thank you very much for coming and for making this memorable for Alwin. And are we going to sing him happy birthday? Monsignor.
I was asking which version shall we sing? We sing all the versions. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Alwin. Happy birthday to you. May the good Lord bless you. May the good Lord bless you. May the good Lord, may the good Lord, may the good Lord bless you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you, dear Alwin. Happy birthday, sing it over. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you, dear friends. Oh, happy birthday. One more time now. Happy birthday, happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you, dear Alwin. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Is there another version? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Anita says there's one more person or thing that she has to say thank you about, but she can't remember what that thing is. But it's my job to now thank the person who gave the vote of thanks as chair. So I'd like to thank Anita very much for just inviting UWI and Alliance Française and DBS to be part of this wonderful collaboration to honor Alwin. All our institutions have been touched by him, and we were so grateful to be able to do this with your family. So thank you very much, and thank you to all the audience members. My staff at UWI are arranging the refreshments for you in the back, so you'll be able to get some wine and some stuff from the platter. So please help yourself and please enjoy yourself. Thank you very much.